Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission is simple. Take a stack of sources, cut through the noise, and extract the truly important insights to give you that shortcut to being well informed.
Yeah, we try to guide you through some complex stuff, find those interesting bits, those key takeaways that, really stick.
And today we're diving deep into some foundational ideas that might just change how you think about, well, your own mind. We're exploring excerpts from a 1934 text drawing on the work of the philosopher and sociologist George Herbert Mead.
Right, and this isn't just some dusty old text. It's actually a really powerful way to understand something fundamental, like how our consciousness, our sense of self, even society itself, gets shaped by how we interact and the language we use.
Yeah, it kind of pushes back on the idea that your mind is just this private thing, all internal. Mead says, no, it's deeply social.
Exactly.
We've got some fascinating concepts to unpack, things like gestures, the I and the me, how communication isn't just sending info, but building reality together.
Okay, let's get into it.
So, maybe start with Mead himself. What was his world like when he was developing these ideas?
Well, Mead was working during a really dynamic period. You had sociology and social psychology really starting to emerge as, distinct sciences.
So people were starting to study society and behavior more systematically, moving beyond just philosophy.
Sort of, yeah. They were trying to be more empirical. And he drew from a lot of places. The text mentions idealistic philosophy, Hegel, Royce, who Mead actually studied under.
Ah, okay. Idealists often stress the social side of things, right?
They did. Consciousness, morality. Mead took those philosophical ideas and tried to ground them in, well, behavior. He was also influenced by early social psychologists like Tard and Baldwin and sociologists like Giddings and Cooley. He actually knew Cooley, taught with him.
Wow, so a real melting pot of new disciplines looking at how individuals and society connect.
Exactly. And it's important, the source notes he studied in Germany, where there was already a lot of focus on the social aspects of things like language, myth, religion. Not just individual stuff, but communal creations.
Okay, and the text highlights Wilhelm Wundt specifically about the idea of the gesture. How did Wundt, or rather Mead, building on Wundt, change how we see gestures?
Right. Wundt was apparently key in seeing the gesture in a social way. Before, you had folks like Darwin seeing gestures mostly as like individual emotional expression. A dog bares its teeth because it feels aggressive.
Just showing emotion.
Yeah. But Wundt, and especially Mead, saw it differently. A gesture is the early part of an act by one creature that gets a response from another, and that response points to the later part of a whole social act.
Huh. So the gesture isn't just leaking feelings, it's like step one in a back and forth, a call and response.
Precisely. It's social from the start. But Mead takes it further. He makes this distinction between those simple gestures, which animals have too, and what he calls significant symbols or gestures.
Okay, tell us about the simple ones first. Animals have those.
Sure. Think about dogs squaring off before a fight. One dog's posture is a gesture, and it makes the other dog get ready in a specific way. Or cows, one starts running. That gesture makes others run too. Even pigeons cooing. The text calls it a conversation of gestures. They act as stimuli, coordinating what the animals do together.
But they're not significant. What's the leap? What makes a gesture significant for Mead?
This is really the core of it. For a gesture to be significant, the person making it has to be able to spark the same response in themselves that it sparks in the other person.
Whoa, hang on, say that again. If I say help, for that to be significant, I have to understand the reaction it causes in you, because it causes basically the same understanding or readiness in me.
Yes, exactly. You're kind of taking the perspective of the listener, interpreting your own word from their viewpoint. Mead puts it behavioristically.
Yeah.
You take the role of the other to guide your own action.
So I anticipate how you'll react.
Right. And by sparking that same response, that shared understanding in both of you, you create common meaning, a community of meaning.
So help isn't just noise. It triggers a shared idea of danger and potential action in both of us. And crucially, I know it does that because it stirs that same basic response in me.
You got it. And Mead says real language, communication as we know it, and even being self-aware, thinking about yourself as an object that only happens through these significant symbols.
That's huge. Thinking about myself depends on using symbols that mean the same thing to others.
That's his argument. It links the self directly to social life. Now, why only humans? Mead touches on biology, though the source says his specific brain science is a bit dated now.
But the basic idea.
The basic idea is that the human organism, our complex brain, our ability to think ahead, plan based on future consequences, even our hands being good at grabbing and isolating objects, gives us the hardware for this really complex symbol use and self-interpretation. A talking parrot mimics sounds, but it doesn't have that shared meaning process.
Okay, so biology enables it, but the process itself is social. Now, Mead's called a social behaviorist. That sounds like Watson's behaviorism, but the source says it's different.
Oh, very different. Watson, famously tried to just get rid of mind and consciousness altogether. Said it was all just conditioned reflexes. Thinking was just tiny muscle movements in your throat.
Just stimulus response, ignore the inner experience.
Yeah. And Mead thought that was just absurd. You can't pretend mind doesn't exist. But, he argued, you can explain it behavioristically. Not reduce it away, but explain its job, its function, as a natural thing happening within the social process.
So it's not throwing out the mind, he's giving a behavioral explanation for how it works.
Exactly. He wanted a more complete behaviorism,
Right.
one that included the nervous system and, really importantly, how we organize our actions based on attitudes.
Attitudes. What does that mean behaviorally?
For Mead, an attitude is like the later part of an action being present in the early part, guiding it. The source uses the example of seeing a hammer.
Okay.
Your body gets ready to grip it. That physical readiness is the attitude. The potential use of the hammer is already organizing how you approach it. Or ideas of a horse. That's not just a picture in your head. It's a whole set of readinesses to act, to ride it, feed it, maybe recognize it as yours. Those potential actions are organized within you as the idea.
So thinking isn't just silent speech, it's having these organized ways of potentially responding based on future possibilities.
Yes, and this loops right back to the social part. Thinking, for Mead, is basically internalizing the social back and forth, that conversation of gestures. Taking the other person's attitude toward your own gesture is how you get meaning, how you have ideas.
And Watson missed that.
Mead felt Watson's view couldn't even explain how conditioning itself works in terms of the person's own ongoing actions and interpretations.
Okay, I think I'm seeing the connections. Gestures, significant symbols, taking the other's attitude. It all seems to point to this big claim about mind, self, and society being intertwined.
Absolutely. And that's maybe Mead's biggest contribution. Mind isn't just stuck inside your skull. It's fundamentally social. It grows out of the social process, out of interaction. It depends on that whole social matrix. Mind is something made possible for a group, not just for one person alone.
That still feels kind of radical. My thoughts feel so intensely private. Is Mead saying my inner monologue is like society talking back to me?
In a very real sense, yes. He'd argue the structure, the content of your thinking is shaped by internalizing all those social conversations. It's the social process playing out inside the individual.
Okay, wow. So how does the social mind handle abstract ideas, like dog in general, not my specific pet? Mead talks about universals.
Right. Behavioristically, a universal isn't some abstract thing floating around. It's a response pattern that works for lots of different specific things.
Like the grasping example.
Exactly. You can grasp a brick, a stone, a cup. That general grasping response pattern is the universal for graspable object. Thinking uses these kinds of generalized responses.
And Dewey and Mead thought these meanings, these universals, they just emerge from coordinating actions with others in society, not pre-existing ideas or just stuck onto words.
Right. Meaning lives in the coordinated social act. And that brings us straight to the self. Just like the mind, the self isn't something you're just born with.
It arises in social interaction.
Yes, specifically through taking the attitudes of others toward yourself.
How does that happen? The source mentions kids play.
Yeah, that's a great way to see it. First stage, play. A kid pretends to be someone else, a doctor, a teacher, maybe a parent. They act out that one role.
One role at a time.
They're organizing their actions around that single perspective, but they don't really have a unified sense of self yet interacting with the whole system.
Okay, so what's next?
The game. Think about baseball. To play your position of, we'll say, shortstop, you can't just know what the shortstop does.
You need to know what the pitcher's likely to do, the batter, the runners, the other fielders.
Exactly. You have to anticipate and understand the attitudes and potential actions of everyone else involved, all at the same time. And you need to understand the rules, the organized responses of the whole group. Taking on all those other roles simultaneously is key for developing full self-awareness.
So the self isn't just playing a role, it's understanding your role within the whole game, the whole social structure.
Yes. And the final step is when you can take the attitude of the entire organized group, the community as a whole, towards its own activities and towards you as an individual. This is what Mead famously called the generalized other.
The sort of collective viewpoint, the internalized rules and expectations of society or your group.
That's it. You internalize the group's perspective. And by doing that, you can guide your own behavior according to the community's standards, even when no one specific is watching. This makes really complex cooperation possible.
So the self is fundamentally social, built from the outside in, through interaction and internalizing these group views.
That's the core idea. And Mead sees this social self as having two dynamic parts or phases, the me and the I.
Ah, the famous I and me. Okay, break those down for us.
The me is the socialized part. It's all those organized attitudes of others, including the generalized other that you've taken into yourself. It's your sense of social norms, how others see you, the expectations. It's the conventional, predictable self. It's what's sort of there in your awareness as social context.
The part of you that knows the social script, what you're supposed to do.
Right. Now, the I is different. The I is your immediate, spontaneous, maybe unpredictable response to the me and to the situation at hand. It's where novelty, creativity, initiative come from. It's the impulsive bit.
So if the me is the script, the I is the actor's performance, maybe even an improvisation.
That's a good way to think about it. And the really interesting thing is you only really know the I after it acts. It appears in memory. You can anticipate the me, the social demand, but your actual response, the I part, is kind of a surprise even to yourself sometimes. It's your unique input into the social flow.
Huh. So when I'm deciding whether to follow the rules, the me, or do something unexpected, the I, the actual action, the unpredictable part, is the I, and I only understand it looking back.
Exactly. The I responds to the me. They're distinct, Mead says, but they belong together. They're part of the whole self. This constant conversation between the social me and the individual I is what makes conscious choice, responsibility, and new ideas possible. It's where personality emerges in the social stream. Mead calls the self an eddy in the social current.
Wow. Okay, this whole view really anchors everything mind, self, and our connections. It feels very relational.
It totally is. And it extends even to how we relate to the physical environment. Mead says the organism kind of selects its own environment through what it pays attention to, what it's sensitive to.
So the environment isn't just objectively out there. We shape it by how we interact with it.
In a way, yes. A bat lives in an environment of sound waves that we mostly don't. Its senses select that. Humans take this much further, especially compared to, say, insect societies.
How are we different from ants or bees in that sense?
Well, insect societies are mostly organized by biology, right? Physiological differences. Castes born to do certain jobs.
Okay.
Human society relies on individuals who are biologically pretty similar, but develop unique psychological selves through that social process we've been talking about. The self, built with significant symbols, makes human society possible.
And unlike insects, we don't just react to the environment, we shape it massively.
Totally. Clothes, buildings, technology, science, we build our world. And our environment even exists in what Mead calls a hypothetical fashion, based on how we anticipate interacting with things. We see something far off and imagine touching it, reacting to it.
Building a mental environment based on potential action.
Right. And communication using those significant symbols is the key organizing process that makes all this complex human stuff work.
It all comes back to taking the attitude of the other.
It's the engine.
Hmm.
And through communication, human intelligence, our ability to analyze things, break them down, rebuild responses that gets put at the disposal of the individual.
So you don't start smart and then become social. You become smart because you're social.
That's the gist of it. Human-level intelligence develops through participating in the social symbolic world.
This must have big implications for ethics too, right? If everything's so social.
Oh, absolutely. Mead builds his ethics right on this foundation. He basically says we're rational because we're social. That feeling of a universal ought, like the golden rule, comes from taking the attitude of the whole community, the generalized other. The form of ethical thinking is social.
So the universal aspect of morality stems from internalizing the community's perspective.
Yes. And Mead actually goes further than someone like Kant. Kant focused on universalizing the form of a rule. Mead thought that because the self is social, the content, the actual goal or end you're aiming for, could also be universalized if it truly serves the social good, benefiting the whole social self.
So good actions aren't just about individual virtue points, they actually build up the social structure and the social self.
Right. Good impulses tend to awaken similar good impulses in others. Good goals help realize the self as a social being. Morality is all about social conduct. Even supposedly private joys, like looking at nature or reading, are often social being. We want to share them, or they're filled with socially learned meanings.
And aiming for the common good is linked to personal fulfillment.
Yeah. Solving ethical problems means considering all the interests involved, especially the broader social ones. Being selfish isn't just being mean, it's having a narrow view of yourself, failing to see the larger self connected to others.
How does sympathy fit into this?
Sympathy, for Mead, is basically the ability to take the role of the other person, to put yourself in their place. It involves that internal process of stimulating yourself to feel or respond as you imagine they are responding.
So it's not just feeling bad for someone, it's feeling with them by simulating your perspective internally.
That's the idea. It's role-taking applied to emotions and experience. The source calls it a key binding cord in human groups, maybe especially clear in parenting.
Okay, so given how central communication and role-taking are, what did Mead see as the ideal society?
Well, he recognized that real societies often have limits, size, structure, like castes maybe, that prevent full role-taking.
Right.
So the ideal human society would be one where communication is so good, so complete, that when people act, they can genuinely take the attitude of everyone they affect.
Like that perfect communication idea affecting yourself exactly as you affect others because the meaning is truly shared.
Yes, that theoretical ideal. And for Mead, that ideal of communication is the ideal of a truly democratic community.
Wow. A democracy where everyone truly gets the impact of their actions on everyone else because they can fully take their perspective? That sounds challenging.
It is. And the source notes that our current democracies often fall short precisely because we don't have that fully developed communication and role-taking, sometimes leading to like a focus on just the lowest common denominator instead of real mutual understanding.
Things like global markets or universal religions might push towards broader perspectives, but don't quite reach that ideal.
They gesture towards it. Like neighborliness involves responding to someone's need as you'd understand your own. Being able to take the other's attitude allows that to extend widely. But the full ideal is that complete universal role-taking.
So wrapping this up, we've really seen how Mead's social behaviorism kind of flips the script. Our minds, ourselves, they're not these isolated things inside us. They emerge from the whole messy, ongoing process of interacting with others using these significant symbols.
Yeah, it's a powerful idea that your ability to think, your very identity, is something you build through relationships, by internalizing others' views, by playing the social game.
That whole dance between the I and the me, being able to take others' roles, creating shared meaning, that's what makes us human and allows society to function.
And here's maybe the really provocative thought. Think about that gap. The gap between Mead's ideal perfect communication, universal empathy through role-taking, and our actual world.
Yeah.
Our misunderstandings, conflicts, the difficulty we have truly seeing from another's viewpoint.
So the question becomes, if our minds and selves are shaped by interaction, could we consciously work on those interactions? Could aiming for better role-taking, more empathetic communication actually help us build smarter individuals and more ethical, functional, maybe even more truly democratic societies?
That's definitely something to think about as you go through your day,
Yeah.
navigating all those social interactions.
Thanks for diving deep with us.